Hi, my name is John Marciano. Welcome to episode 1 of The War Room, where we talk about the war on drugs in America and how it has affected our society. First off, I want to say I'm very excited to talk about this because this is this is a topic that I hold very dear to my heart. I feel that everybody knows someone who's been affected either by drugs or by the war on drugs and wrongful incarceration. So I'm definitely I'm looking forward to doing this.
Yeah, my name's Nicolas Mayer. I am originally from Louisville, and I would say about 2 years ago, Louisville went through a huge heroin epidemic, and that's what really got me to want to join in on this project. I'm also looking forward to discussing this, maybe possible solutions, causes, things we can do different.
Yep. My name is Andrew Aronson. I'm from a small town in northern Kentucky. It's about 5 minutes out of Cincinnati. But obviously UK student here, studying finance and accounting. So basically we're all in a Word 111 class together, and we're given the task to make a podcast. Topic of your choice, we chose the war on drugs and minimum sentencing. So I say we just get into it. So basically I just want to talk about a little background behind it. A lot of people don't really know the history of the war on drugs, even before that. So basically, obviously, drugs have been around for tens of thousands of years, most likely a problem that will never go away. Throughout the 19th and 20th century, many drug policies were put in place targeting demographics that use specific types of drugs. For example, in the 1870s, anti-opium laws were put into place targeting Chinese immigrants. In the early 1900s, anti-cocaine laws were implemented targeting blacks in the South. In the 1920s, anti-marijuana laws were put into place targeting Mexican immigrants in the Midwest.
And you can even talk about like early 1900s in America, Prohibition era, kind of getting rid of alcohol and people still finding a way to use them. So people finding ways around these kind of laws is something that's been going on for years.
Yeah, there's always a black market for anything, and if you put anybody in jail, somebody else is going to take the place because there's money in it. But so obviously, even before the war on drugs, there were many drug policies that were put into place targeting specific demographics. And then flash forward to 1971, Richard Nixon declared the war on drugs and minimum sentencing protocols for all drug-related offenses, claiming it to be the number one public enemy. So basically, he just intensified law enforcement, crackdown on drugs, made minimum sentencing a thing, no-knock warrants. Basically, he also had anti-war or anti-drug propaganda. And the war on drugs only got worse as other presidents after him. With Ronald Reagan, he greatly expanded the scope of the war. He gained lots of capital. 1986, a bill was passed, the anti-drug abuse bill, which put $1.7 billion into the war on drugs and incarceration. A few just quick statistics. So drug incarceration for nonviolent drug crime rose from 50,000 in 1980 to over 400,000 in 1979. He's also responsible for many programs such as DARE to educate the younger generations about the risks and punishments of the drugs. He separated, going back to targeting demographics, Reagan separated cocaine and crack sentences, even though they are the exact same drug. So, for example, if a person was caught with 5 grams of crack, they would be given a 5-year minimum sentence, and it would take somebody with 500 grams of powder cocaine to get that same sentence. And if you look at statistics, 80% of crack users in the 80s were African American. So right there, I don't think that's any question.
I mean, yeah, there's been no question that race has been a factor in how bad that this epidemic has been. And I don't know if you said it earlier, but addiction is classified as a disease, something that you could cure. but it's still it is very discriminatory of the disease. Like,
if you look at the dictionary definition of addiction, it is categorized as a disease. So knowing that, you're locking people up with diseases, just throwing them basically in a cage with no help, no way to get help, and basically just live with their disease. I mean, you're not going to cure anything or fix the root of the problem by throwing 400,000 people in jail in 10 years.
You know, and when the drugs or the war on drugs was, I guess, first declared, they were looking at these addicts as criminals and not people who needed help. Exactly. I mean, if you classify addicts as people with mental illnesses or illnesses, you don't treat them like criminals. I mean, you don't treat someone with a learning disability as a criminal and just throw them away. I mean, I think they went about this the complete wrong way. It's definitely an outdated perspective.
Well, I mean, if you look at behind the real meaning of it, I mean, I think the whole thing was racially motivated. Just looking at what they did and how these drugs were scheduled. I mean, marijuana he made marijuana a Schedule I drug, which means he put it at the same level as heroin, which basically means that it has no medical purposes and abuse rates are very high.
You also look at the time period where the war on drugs was introduced. It was about 15 to 20 years after they had banned the Jim Crow laws. So a lot of people have already, or especially a lot of older people had already made up their mind about kind of what they support and what they don't support. And being on the back end of discrimination during this time was awful. Like, you would be in trouble for stuff that you didn't do, kind of like unfair sentencing for anything, if you weren't a white man or a white woman.
Yeah. You know, if you look at it too, it's just, especially from what Andrew said, 5 grams of crack versus, what did you say, 500?
500 grams of cocaine. By the way, that's almost 18 pounds.
That is, I mean, I don't think a rational person could see that as anything else but a continuation of,
racism.
these sort of Jim Crow laws. It's just that was, especially if 80% in the 1980s of crack users were African American, that's a law just to explicitly go after.
Anybody can see that.
And you look at the areas kind of where cocaine is distributed and crack cocaine is distributed. Even though it's the same drugs, you can get one for a lot cheaper than you can get the other. Kind of in rundown neighborhoods or somewhere that you kind of wouldn't want to be after dark.
Yeah. Reagan stated that, he kind of blamed everything on drug users. He said he made drugs the number one public enemy in the United States, saying that it's the reason for unemployment, low-income areas, homelessness, et cetera. He basically just blamed everything on drugs, targeting it. What's only, you see that. You just see the president saying, do not do drugs, they're bad. But if you look behind the curtain, there's obviously some darker motives behind it.
And, there probably is some truth to that.
Yes, I know there is, but
I
don't think locking people up is a way to go about fixing the problem.
I think you're exactly right. Look, the way they're looking and seeing these people as just criminals and nothing else, it's not a productive thing to do.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, if they're, the goal was to just lock up as many people for drugs as they could,
they're doing a great job.
Doing a great job. Now I think, there's 2.3 million people incarcerated in America, which America has the highest number of incarcerated people in the world. Think about that. I mean, one in 5 inmates are in there for possession of drugs, nonviolent minimum sentencing.
I mean, you'll look at the statistics of people in jail and out of jail, but really what you don't see is the cycle that they go through, because many of these people aren't just in jail for one time. They are homeless, end up on drugs, end up in jail, and when they get out, nobody gives them the help that they need to get better.
And they've already got that track record following them everywhere. I mean, they can't apply for jobs. They can't apply for housing. It's just a reoccurring revolving door.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can't get a job. You can't get a house. So that just basically leaves you out on the street to do drugs, and that's it. There's really no other option.
I know this story that I'm about to talk about isn't from the U.S. It's actually from Toronto, Canada, where their mayor, his name was Rob Ford, was caught on video smoking crack out of a pipe, and I believe, I mean, he was obviously thrown out of office really quick, but I believe that there are a lot of politicians that not even, I wouldn't say crack, but like a lot of politicians that smoke weed, in a state where it's illegal.
So one thing that I kind of learned doing research on this was the original plan for the war on drugs was not just, it didn't only apply to the U.S. It was also Central America and South America, especially like these countries such as Colombia, this place where a lot of manufacturing of these drugs was coming from. And there is a report from 2014, and it's called Measuring the Success on the War on Drugs. And Colombia basically had a plan to reduce cultivation and distribution of illegal narcotics by 50% in a 6-year period between 2000 and 2006. However, that did not happen. And they did get opium poppy cultivation down, but for heroin, but coca or whatever that plant is that goes into cocaine, that was up by 15%. So instead of reaching their plan, it just shot up.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I could say about like kind of the Central American countries is a lot of the drug producers and distributors run the countries. Like you look at the cartel, for instance, in Mexico, like nobody's going to mess with them. And people are scared to put laws in place to kind of put them in jail. So I see Reagan, like he was looking at it as a good idea, trying to prevent stuff like this. But instead, it just caused a completely different epidemic, putting people that kind of don't really deserve it in jail.
Think about this. I mean, in 2020, the people over 12 years old, their drug use went up by 13%, which is an all-time high of 40 years, which is just about the time that the war was put into place. So if that tells you anything, the drug war has failed.
So I want to actually chime into what John was saying. These cartels are running these countries, and a big reason why I think the war on drugs failed to the extent that it did is these Central America and South American countries no longer want to play ball with America. They don't want to help do it because it's been going on since the 70s, and there's been zero progress made. If anything, it's gotten worse.
Yes, it has gotten worse if you look at the statistics.
So, I mean, they to be honest with you, they probably started, a lot of them probably, there was a thought process behind the government, like, if we get this down and drugs kind of go away, these cartels won't be in business, they won't run these countries anymore. But it hasn't happened. It's just improved.
Mm-hmm. What I want to talk about a little bit is kind of the financials behind it. As all of us, we pay taxes, and we want to know where our tax dollars go. So here's a little bit about that. So the war, an annual $51 billion goes into the war on drugs every year. Since it was put into place, over $1 trillion has been put into the war on drugs, and that's coming straight from the taxpayers. We pay for inmates in prisons, and if there's 1.1 million people locked up for drug-related crimes, and each one of them costs anywhere from $14,000 to $70,000. Multiply those two together, and I think it's close to $200 million or so.
Why would we pay for something that isn't working? Like, exactly. Why would we want to do that? It's a waste of money, in my opinion.
It is. These people need help, and they're not getting the help they need.
Go ahead. I was going to say, we grow up, and they preach not to do drugs and stuff like that. You mentioned the DARE program earlier. But we took a survey, and actually, Nicholas is about to bring up the statistics. The amount of people that did not know what the war on drugs is astonishing to me, honestly. Even though I think, what was it, a little under 30% didn't know what it was.
So, no, 30% were not in favor of ending it. Only 13.6% said they did not know what it was.
So, I mean, the information is out there, but people don't know a lot about this.
But think about it. I mean, it's not really taught in schools. No. It's an active policy. So there's not really, to an extent, there is history behind it, but it's not done yet.
I mean, basically all I was told was don't do drugs or don't get caught with drugs, really, or,
I'd like to just mention something right now. Imagine if you had been caught 10, 20, 30 years ago and you're doing a huge sentence for a marijuana possession.
Exactly.
How angry do you have to be right now?
Think about it. Imagine you're in that state, and about 10 years after you're incarcerated, you have, let's say, 15 more years on your sentence. Marijuana gets legalized.
It's for the 1.1 million people in jails for drugs, almost half of those are on marijuana charges.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about some solutions that we think could go into play here. Definitely, in my opinion, one of the biggest things that we have is kind of spreading the word out, making sure that people know that, hey, this is not working. We need to change it up.
I mean, a change doesn't happen overnight, but, obviously, if you can vote and you see bills or laws being put into place for rehabilitation opposed to punishing people for doing drugs, definitely vote for those laws. If you really want to make this country better and get these people the help they need.
I would just like to add something. So in this survey that we did, we had about 44 responses, and it was a predominantly white and male-dominated responses. But basically, about 70% of people said they're in favor of ending the war on drugs, and 72% said they are definitely in favor of ending minimum sentencing. So there's support for it.
Yeah, I think there's just a generation gap that needs to be. We need to get over that hump.
Oh yeah, if you try to talk about this subject with your grandparents, they wouldn't argue facts. They just call you dumb.
Yeah.
No, I mean, don't do drugs. Lock them up. Come on.
Yeah. Well, it'd be terrible. But I think this is something that's going to be up to our generation, maybe our kids,
and the younger generations,
maybe even the millennials in front of us.
If you look at countries that have decriminalized drugs, such as Switzerland, they've decriminalized all drugs, got rid of minimum sentencing. Basically, instead of our philosophy, which is don't do it, if you do it, we're going to punish you. Theirs is if you do it and you get caught, we're going to give you the help you need. They have medical centers set up around the country where people can get their doses safely. This decreases overdose rates, lowers HIV, and gets people off of these drugs and the help they need. If you look at their statistics versus ours, it's kind of mind-blowing.
Yep. Also, Oregon, look at that. Mm-hmm. They just decriminalized a lot of drugs. Was it all drugs that they decriminalized?
I believe it was all drugs, yes.
They were getting support from both parties.
Yeah.
And I was going to throw in a video here, but I honestly don't think that it's a great source, because it's literally him talking about why he decided to vote yes to decriminalize all these drugs.
Well, he was the only Matt Gaetz. Are you talking about that?
Yeah,
video?
Matt Gaetz.
Well, he was the only Republican in Oregon to support that bill.
Oh, he was. I thought
the only one.
Oh, wow.
So that's why it was such a big deal. But that was a move to decriminalize all drugs.
Yeah, not just like, what is it, class? What are like the lowest ones?
It was I don't know. I'm sure.
Schedule 1. Marijuana Schedule 1, which is completely crazy.
Yeah.
If you're in Colorado, you can go to a dispensary and, it's just like buying a case of beer or something. But head over to Louisiana or Texas, you're going to jail if you get caught with weed or selling weed.
And also, while we're on the topic of getting or like buying drugs somewhere, we never really look into prescription drugs as well that really lead to people getting into these harder drugs such as meth and heroin because they just want to feel something, like feel the same that they did like after they got out of surgery or something like that.
Big Pharma in the early 2000s were prescribing people opium for back pain. It was a really big problem in Kentucky with all these coal miners and such that have been working, underground for 30 years. It takes a toll on your back. And they were prescribing everybody opium pills, such as oxycodone and whatnot. And all these people got addicted to it. And once they saw that happening, and they did not warn them or anything about the nature of the drug and how addictive it is. And they stopped prescribing it cold turkey. So what did these people do? They're addicted to opium. They're going to go out on the streets and get heroin. I mean, this is the problem. People that have kids, have wives, steady job, and it was created by Big Pharma in this country, and then they just let these people off on the streets and destroyed families.
And you look at most of these stories, it's a cause and effect thing. Like one thing happens where you say wouldn't have access to pills or anything like that, and the effect is you're out there buying something for a lot cheaper, and ending up in jail for a lot longer.
Well, it's like the prohibition thing, like what you said earlier. When you can't get it, in a legal regulated market, you either make it or you go to someone who can.
Exactly.
And back in Prohibition, they were making liquor in their bathtubs. That's obviously not sanitary or safe. So the whole thing's just backwards.
If there's a want for it, somebody's going to fill in. If there's a want and there's money in it, somebody's always going to fill in.
It just shows what people would do for some money. But I mean, we can't really end the war on drugs until everybody is in it together.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be support on both sides, and it seems right now
there's a split,
especially from like places like Oregon who are trying to do these radical drug bills. It seems like a Democratic or more Democrats are in favor of this than Republicans.
Yeah,
and I would consider myself a very moderate person. And I'm definitely in favor of ending this. Maybe not ending or like decriminalizing everything, but just coming up with something so more people don't have to suffer. Like maybe proposing a bill to Senate about kind of lessening sentences or maybe decriminalizing weed in all states, something along the lines of that. So we wouldn't have as many people in jail for smaller offenses.
And I know this is a very politically motivated topic, but I don't think it should be because it doesn't matter. I mean, drugs don't discriminate. You can be Democrat, in the middle, Republican. If you're addicted to drugs, you're addicted to drugs.
Yeah, I mean, I've just always been of the opinion, if it doesn't bother me, just let it be.
Exactly.
Thank you very much for tuning into this podcast. I think we got through a lot of great information today and had some great conversations. I hope you have a great day.